I'm Trinity Anderson, producer and narrator of Plog Vlog, and this is a compilation of our Chapter 3 episodes. Chapter 3 is about pillars of self-esteem. It's 10 episodes testing what happens when you rest worth on various aspects of ourselves. We've stitched the whole chapter into one long story, so it works audio only. Feel free to listen while you walk or plog, as we keep naming what each episode was trying to do and what the next one will try. Our first stop tries to explore task paralysis and show how one small physical job can unknot a crowded mind. Filmed as my foster father rides a battered, zip-tied Suzuki from Logan Village up to Mount Tamborine, picking up litter. I'm Trinity Anderson, producer and narrator of Plog Vlog. My foster father and I make plogging videos. He collects the litter and I tell stories in the background. When he takes the motorcycle, he plogs alone. Yeah, with nobody else. I'm the voice you hear later, stitching a story from what he calls his field radio. 2 tracks. His tyre tread out in the world. My audio track back at the desk. When life feels crowded, do you ever pick one small physical task, something humble and useful, to unknot your mind? He started this run at Logan Village, about 20 kilometres from home. Across from the old Logan Village Hotel sits the forest of memories. Decorated bollards in a grassy field, each keeping a local story. The yellow Suzuki sits patiently in a muddy car park, cotton plog vlog bag on the back. There's not a lot of litter here, but enough to make plogging worthwhile. A nurse looks out from one bollard, a railway man from another. I like that these stories stand where kids on scooters can tap them and ask, "Who's that?"
Trinity's not with me today because I'm on the motorbike. And when I'm on the motorbike, styrofoam. I plug alone, yeah, with nobody else.
He sings badly, as usual, as he plogs alone.
I prefer to be by myself with a Kit Kat.
I'm deliberately making Plog Vlog kinder to ears as well as eyes. If you're walking, driving, cooking, you can keep listening. I'll keep you oriented. I'll edit out most of the motorcycle's engine noise and replace it with more peaceful sounds.
There's another motorbike. This is bigger than mine, but I'm used to that. That's pretty much the case my whole life.
I've asked my foster father to record ambient sounds when he's in quiet places, while he makes his field radio posts on Instagram. These are photos and tiny clips he posts in real time, with a little text for context. They're the live pings. These episodes are the slow-cooked versions. It takes a lot longer for me to edit and narrate a video than it takes for him to film himself plogging, so I'm always way behind him. I'll drop in one of those quick field radio notes here from the start of the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail at Yarraman, so you can feel the tempo he moves at. If you want the running log, you'll find it on the Plog Vlog Instagram. You'll see the full rail trail episode later. Back with me. From Logan Village, he rolls towards Tamborine Mountain. Road signs tick past. The thump of a single cylinder under load. A dog barks once and fades. At the "Welcome to Tamborine Mountain" sign he stops, scanning for a bin. None here. Past the Cedar Creek turnoff, he finds a crowded car park near a waterfall track. Wattlebirds chatter, a queue at the loos. He tips the bag neatly into a bin, then tidies the corners. Chip packets behind a log, a paper cup half flattened near a wheel stop.
Hey man, what type of camera is that?
That's an Insta360.
Oh hell yeah, nice.
Yeah,
What's
so that
that for?
gets
everything.
Oh, you got the full 360 version of the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Awesome.
I'm kind of like bristling with cameras.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I go around picking up rubbish and just filming it to encourage other people to do it.
Yeah, awesome.
And this one's DJI Action 2. So
Okay.
it's nice and light for, like, I actually film the picking up of the rubbish.
Oh, that's cool. You got on the top
Yeah.
too. That's like a really cool POV.
Yeah. So, yeah, this one's for that. That one's mainly just for when I'm on the bike.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They're really good, but the file size is enormous.
What was it? Plog
Vlog.
Plog vlog.
Yeah, I just sort of, myself and my foster daughter do videos. She does like the editing and the narration and stuff. And I just go around and do the filming.
A man curious about the camera appears in the footage, pointing at the Insta360 stuck to the bars. They compare scratches and lenses. One more little human knot, loosened by a chat about tools of the trade. A note I should keep plain. I don't use my real name. I don't go in front of any of these cameras. And I don't get on the bike. It's safer and clearer this way. He appears when the story needs hands. I stay on the radio and at the script. We're a team for a project, for a mission. We share the work from different places. On the ridge where hang gliders launch, there's another pause. Mountain air cleans the lungs. A teacher walks over from his black road bike and tells my foster father that he's also got the same yellow Suzuki 400 and is planning an outback run. They discuss cut-down seats, panniers, and fuel tank limitations. My foster father used to deliver food on that bike to fund ads for plogging, but a longer school commute ate the evenings, and weekends had to be used for plogging and filming. He'd love an electric motorcycle, quiet, clean, but the ones that could handle these roads and distances aren't affordable in Australia, yet. So he's doing his best with this battered zip-tied thumper, careful choices, and rides like this. Meanwhile, I'm reading through my mother's old diaries, the set she titled The Enlightenment from the early 90s. I found them boxed up after she died. Pages loosened by weather and time, ticket stubs asleep between leaves. Liz wrote in her 1993 diary, Vicksburg. The battlefield isn't dead. Trenches still breathe in the grass. Cannons watch each other across gullies, as if the fight paused for lunch and forgot to resume. And later, blue plaques, red plaques, names on stone that make the skin go cold. We walked for hours and felt small among the voices. I don't read Mum's lines to be morbid. I read them to remember that places keep their stories, whether we notice or not. Perhaps litter is just a new language of forgetting. I wonder if the Vicksburg battlefields are now littered with plastic wrappers, rather than battlefield casualties. My foster father rides again, past lawn signs and fruit stalls. The engine note, a metronome. I've been thinking about task paralysis, how even simple jobs can feel sticky, as if your mind is wading through syrup. Overwhelm, fear of getting it wrong. I get task paralysis at university and at work, but never when making these videos. A quiet truth. Without making and narrating these episodes, I fear my life would feel dull and small. Editing and narrating these rides and the tidying that goes with them help me feel part of something larger. Maybe that's why the small physical acts matter. They turn attention outward. Let's be frank about how environmental repair travels online. Plogging films rarely get broad organic reach. Platforms aren't built to reward quiet maintenance. Paid promotion helps. You'll hear a short clip here, the one with my foster father holding Elfie, the Indian ringneck, explaining why we boost some videos.
This is a bird. There's nothing wrong with her. She's just a ploy to get your attention. Because us eco-creators, we need to get better at getting people's attention. We need to be able to advertise environmental protection and environmental restoration better than the people who are advertising things that destroy the planet. Want to try that again? Come here. Come on. Elfie, come on. We'll do that again. Second take. Come on. Come on. Come here. We'll do another take.
Organic views often preach to the choir. He's experimenting with ways to fund wider reach, so the picking up litter idea finds people who'd never search for it. 2 quick waypoints if you're catching up. Chapter 2 opened at Lake Manchester Dam, where my mother's old diary first set the bigger question: what still matters after survival? Later, in Carnarvon Gorge, we tested endurance against fatigue. If you're new here, you can drop back to those, or watch the compilations. There are 2 now. Back to Liz again. At a Memphis Greyhound depot in 1993, seats wouldn't go back. Knees to chin, we slept in motion and woke elsewhere. Discomfort is just a tax you pay when you're moving, she added. He pulls his hat over his eyes like he's moving into his own room and locking the door. One more audio-first reminder before we close. If you've been watching, you can pocket the screen, if you want. My foster father jokes that not showing his face is a public service, and that he should keep his helmet visor down in these videos. Perhaps he's right. You can decide. He's back in the manic traffic of Brisbane's highways. The forest of memories looked better for a few minutes, because he stopped there. And maybe it will hold that line until the next picnic lunch or windy night. Keeping a place clean is never just one person, one time. It's a tag team activity. In the pinned comment, there's a map showing the Forest of Memories location. If you visit it, that green in Logan Village, please pick up a few bits. 5 is plenty. It stops a place being re-trashified. And it turns a stop on a ride into a small kindness the world can actually feel. I'm Trinity. Thanks for listening, watching if you wanted to, and for helping the story carry on. That'll do, for now. In episode 1, we were trying to prove that when life feels jammed, starting with a single humble, useful task can cut through the fog. Next, in Yarraman on the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail, Episode 2 tests what happens when restlessness and novelty-seeking get a healthy lane, a construct called trait channel fit, focusing on people who only settle once their week includes exploration. I'm Trinity Anderson, producer and narrator of Plog Vlog. I tell stories while my foster father picks up litter in beautiful places. We're heading for Yarraman, at the northern end of the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail, about 145 kilometres from home in Brisbane. Before we begin, a quick question for you. When a role ends in your life, what do you put in its place? Today's lens is trait channel fit, living in ways that suit your built-in tendencies. A related line of research looks at a dopamine receptor variant often nicknamed the adventure gene, DRD4-7R. The careful version is simple. Some people appear, in some studies, more drawn to novelty and exploration. It doesn't decide your fate. Most behaviour comes from a mix of predispositions, upbringing, peers, opportunity, and choices. But if your baseline appetite for the new is higher, you'll feel more settled when your week includes exploration. Give that drive a healthy channel. Travel, fieldwork, service, art, and it can become useful energy. Block it, and it may leak sideways into impulsivity, risk, or self-medication. That's the construct. Now, the example. Yarraman matters to our channel because it's where my foster father came the day after his stepchild finished high school. Being a father of a dependent child had been one of the pillars of his self-esteem. With that pillar gone, he needed a replacement, something sturdy and honest. He decided to walk the 160 kilometres to Ipswich along this rail trail to think. 10 days, summer heat, almost no one around. He reached Ipswich with ideas, but no decision.
Okay, here's the conundrum, right? So this is the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail. Now, obviously, I'm not going to ride my motorbike on here, but I think it's probably okay. I want to use the motorbike as a camera stand right at the start up here. So I think it's probably okay if I push the bike, don't you think? I'm just going to push the bike down there. I won't ride it. I'll even, no, I want to leave my helmet on because no one needs to see the top of my head. It's too ugly. So we'll do that.
2 years later, he came back, met graziers funding koala habitat,
So this video is evidence, if anyone ever comes, that I did not ride my motorbike down here.
and a lone YouTuber filming a bike trip, and saw a path forward. Use a YouTube channel as a small act of ecological philanthropy. That became our origin point. Not that long after, I was working through my mother's diaries. The first set runs from late 1992 into 1993, when she travelled with her childhood friend David across the United States. Liz kept asking first principles questions that we now weave into this channel. What is the most important thing in life? When the basics are met, what remains that everybody needs? Later she wrote, "We walked past music and argued kindly about whether meaning is built or found."
Pet Rundies, gross. I really would rather not put that in there, but it is what it is.
I think it is built by what we do.
Let's have a look through here.
He thinks it is found when we notice what's already there. Those questions keep the compass true. If you're new here, previous episodes touched the same questions in different places. At Lake Manchester Dam, we noticed how work and wonder can share the same day. At Beardmore, we saw how rivers organise effort. At White Rock, we asked what purpose looks like in later life. Today, we're pressing specifically on trait channel fit. Old David told me a story about his father, Brian.
This looks like a bunker.
He said, "Dad drove buses in Sydney.
What is this?
In 1961, he found his girlfriend in bed with his best mate. He sold 2 MG cars,
I wonder what this was.
bought a ticket to New Zealand,
Let's keep looking around.
picked up an old Indian motorcycle,
That belongs in our target audience. Small plastics. Things that can fit in the bag. I can't carry much on the motorbike.
and circled Aotearoa twice. He learnt songs, place names, and how cold rain feels through cheap leather. Then came marriage, work, and a son. The roaming stopped. The beer got louder. I think the contrast is the lesson. When Brian had a channel, roads, movement, learning, he flourished. When the channel narrowed, the restlessness didn't vanish. It diverted into alcohol. Same drive, different direction. That's trait channel fit in human terms. Liz's diaries show a similar current in Brian's son David, with a healthier lane. She wrote in Kingman, Arizona, "David is happiest when there is a map on the table and a station to walk to. He says, new places reset me." He wasn't chasing danger. He was chasing a better conversation with himself.
Now, when I walked back to Brisbane, to Ipswich actually, 161 kilometres, it was that way. I started from here, and I had my backpack, and I just started walking. Let's see if I can find a photo of that, Trinity.
If you allow for the possibility of that adventure gene pull, the pattern makes sense. Younger David leaned into travel and enquiry. Brian started there, then lost the road and tried to fill the gap at the pub. Back to Yarraman for context. The rail line once ran timber and cattle along this spine to Wulkuraka near Ipswich. When the line closed, councils and volunteers stitched it into a public path. The modern term is amenity. I prefer commons, because it reminds us that access comes with care.
Then we're all finished, and this is evidence that I'm pushing the bike out and not riding it.
A rail trail is simple social engineering. Take a corridor built for movement and keep it moving. Feet, wheels, stories, so the place stays used and maintained. It's also an example of channel design. Provide a lane and behaviour flows into it. There's a sociological angle here. Identity after a role shift. When you stop being the parent of a dependent child, there's a temptation toward identity foreclosure, rushing into a new label to dodge the blank space. My foster father chose a different route, a temporary project with constraints, a defined path, a time window, a physical task. That sort of container can hold the psychological wobble while you decide what's next. In our case, the what's next became Plog Vlog. He still jokes that on a teacher's wage you can afford a car or adventure, not both. So he chooses adventure and rides the motorcycle he has. It sounds flippant, but it's a real trade-off, prioritising a well-fitted channel over comfort. A quick note on philosophy, because it sits under the questions we keep returning to. Liz had been given a philosophy book by a Norwegian friend named Eric and became obsessed enough to learn some Norwegian. That's why, on the road in 1993, she could explain ideas to David he couldn't read for himself. In philosophical terms, we're often working with virtue ethics and practice. You become what you repeatedly do. If the answer for some people includes movement and making, then the practical job is to build social lanes that make healthy versions of those things commonplace. Trails, citizen science, community cleanups, practical craft, care work. If we don't, the energy doesn't disappear. It seeks other outlets. To be clear, none of this argues that anyone is trapped by a gene, or that wandering is better than staying. It's simply an acknowledgement that appetites for novelty and stimulation vary, and communities function best when they offer multiple legitimate ways to meet those appetites. In classrooms I've helped in, the pattern holds. Some kids settle when they get a hike, a garden bed, or a real job to do. The worksheet alone doesn't fit their channel. Design the lanes, and behaviour improves. 2 small reveals before we close. First, I delayed opening my mother's diaries for months. Grief made paper heavy. When I finally read them, I realised this channel could be more than tidy bins and nice views. It could be a way to test ideas in real places without turning into lectures. Second, I've adjusted my voice. Plainer language. Tighter claims. If this works for you, I'll keep it. Please let me know what you think. If you visit Yarraman, you'll find the trailhead easily. My foster father has done what he could here today, but keeping it clean is a shared job. There's an interactive map in the pinned comment showing what was collected and what still needs care. If you pass through, pick up a few pieces, 5 is enough, and help keep the commons from being re-trashified. Small channels, well kept, carry a lot of good. That was different. And I admit that my foster father helped a bit with the psychology stuff, but that'll do. In episode 2, we were trying to show how life changes when an adventure gene gets a good channel, instead of leaking sideways once parenting or old roles fall away. Up next, in Adelaide, episode 3 turns to Appearance-contingent self-esteem, the risks of staking worth on beauty and attention, with Mum's 1993 diary and the Somerton man hovering in the background.
This is the spot here where in, I think it was 1948, they found the body of the Somerton man. That's really worth checking out.
I'm Trinity, and this is Plog Vlog. One walk, a handful of litter, and a story about purpose and care. We're in Adelaide, South Australia, about 1,600 kilometres from home as the crow flies. Wind licks the ocean. A tram sighs through a surprisingly clean city. My foster father didn't plan to plog here. Cities can feel Sisyphean when the rubbish returns by evening, but Adelaide surprised him. Streets were cleaner than he expected. Compliments to locals came easily. And for once, he felt the small act in a city would actually hold. Today we're exploring the construct appearance-contingent self-esteem. In plain English, building your sense of worth on how attractive or attention-getting you are. It isn't a verdict on beauty itself. Beauty's a gift. Attention can help. The caution is over-reliance. If your worth hangs on a look, time will tug at it. The practical response to the so what is simple. Design steadier pillars, skills, care, conversation, service, so you're okay when the mirror changes. Here's a question for you. Which parts of your self-esteem could time crumble, and which parts are built to last? Here's some context while you think. Adelaide now, then Mum's diaries later. I'm threading a day from 1993 when Mum, her name was Liz, and young David were travelling through the American South. The morning began on Beale Street, where tourist brochures promised magic. They watched the Peabody Ducks ride the lift to a red carpet, fanfare, crowd, and then only 4 ducks, which made everyone smile at their own overblown expectations. Later, they rumbled out on a World War II amphibious run, past Mud Island, the Great American Pyramid, the Lorraine Motel where a wreath hangs for Martin Luther King. The tone was wonder mixed with weight. Back to the present. Adelaide is a city drawn with a ruler, parklands holding the shape of it, light that feels Mediterranean, salt in the air from Gulf St. Vincent. City planners once imagined civic health would grow if people lived with trees and open space. Whether or not that was ever fully true, you can feel the intention in your stride. My foster father says intention matters. It sets a floor on decay. Adelaide's lack of litter may be evidence of its city planners' foresight. Jumping back to Mum's diary, on a bus to Graceland, in the afternoon, Liz and David arrived at the wall where fans had carved devotion into stone. David's journal muttered about the price of everything. He even wrote a little song that made him laugh at himself. David wrote this to fit the tune of Waltzing Matilda. We went to Graceland, what a disgrace, man, under the shade of a big money tree. He also counted costs. House here, cars there, film in a little theatre, planes for a separate fee. The mood of a theme park grafted onto a man's life. It wasn't his favourite kind of day. A moment that anchors our exploration of self-esteem being contingent on beauty came next. Liz saw a young staffer at the Jets, the Lisa, Marie and hound dog too, checking for boarding passes. He glanced at David's broad shoulders, the way gatekeepers sometimes do when they're worried about rules, or crowds, or trouble they can't name. Liz changed the air. A small compliment about his important job, a conspiratorial smile. And when the glance flicked back to David, she breezed, "He's just my brother, not as dangerous as he looks." The line diffused whatever the glance had gathered. The staffer waved her through. For Liz, doors often opened like that, charmed, not forced. Inside, she noticed the gold-toned seat belts, the TCB lightning bolts, how compact the cabin felt. It was over in minutes. No great heist, no moral collapse. A tiny bend in the rules that sat on a bigger pattern. If attention followed her, small obstacles softened. In her 20s, the currency of beauty felt endless. And this is where appearance-contingent self-esteem hides its hook. It works. Until it doesn't. Back with me now. Old David told me recently that as his own looks faded with age, and the doors didn't swing quite as quickly, he found something steadier. Conversation was enough, he said. Presence was also enough. Friendship stopped needing performance. He had once used his own attractiveness in the fitness world to braid companionship without commitment. There's no need to dwell on that beyond naming the pattern. But later, he discovered the relief of not needing that dance. I'm thinking about this a lot because I've just graduated from my teaching degree and been offered a 1-year contract with a Year 4 class next year. And yet, old David has made me fall in love with ideas, philosophy, psychology, sociology, just as Liz had helped him discover their wonder during that 1993 adventure around the world. Part of me wonders if I chose the wrong degree. If your pillars of worth sit on being the person who looks like they have it together, the tidy Pinterest teacher with laminated labels, what happens the day you don't? On the other hand, if the pillar is service, helping a 9-year-old catch the shape of fractions, Or a class catch the habit of care? Maybe that's solid ground. Maybe I need a broader conception of caregiving. Maybe beauty and competence and attention can live there too, but they aren't the foundations. Again, that question for you, now that you've had time to think about it. Which parts of your self-worth could time or fashion take away? And which parts are built to endure for your whole life? A quick reality check to keep us honest. Not everything that day in Memphis was charming. Liz and David ate bread near a bakery, where a worker, clearly unwell, casually vomited on the path outside the store, and then vanished through the service door. The world has its grotesque edges. Travel rubs your face in them. It's part of why the Graceland Circus felt so loud to David. He recorded one clean line and moved on. David wrote,
Adelaide, bloody good
"They
work.
charge money
Bloody
to
good
see
work.
everything. $8 for the house, $5 for the cars, $3 for the film. Prices were a mood, not just numbers." Old David sometimes lets me see bits of his old journals, but only select sentences, maybe a paragraph or two. Sometimes I wonder what he is hiding. Perhaps his feelings for Liz. 2 small links for newcomers. At Manchester Dam, we asked, what matters after our survival needs are satisfied? At Karawatha, we named alloparenting, raising non-biological children, as a pillar of my foster father's self-esteem. At White Rock, we explored finding purpose in later life, while walking among pale sandstone. Those threads run under this one. They all point to the same thing. If you can place your weight on steadier pillars, you're more sturdy when the winds change. It's all part of the answer to the riddle of steel, knowing what makes us strong. I'm a newcomer to this, but I have people around me who have been studying philosophy, psychology, and sociology for decades. They share, and I listen, and contemplate what I learn here on Plog Vlog. I'm fascinated to hear what you think. Back in Adelaide, my foster father kept saying how heartening it was to see so little litter. He would point to a clean verge as if it were a compliment to the city. And when he did find rubbish, he picked it up with a kind of joy. That's another pillar, I think. Care expressed in small acts. No one notices,
Storm-boy
no doors
country.
open, but you change the ground a fraction for the next person.
Maybe we'll see
And
Mr. Percival.
you don't need to be pretty to do it. He laughs that he's evidence of that. So here's the mapping, as promised. When Liz had an attention channel, access improved. Free entry to a paid thing, a line that worked, a smile that softened a rule. That's power. The risk is tying your worth to whether the channel is open today.
Good morning, Mr. Percival.
When old David learned to anchor value in conversation and presence, the outcomes improved in a different way. Friendships that didn't wobble with the mirror. And for me, choosing teaching or anything will be safer if I keep the pillar on service, not status or shine. Back with me now. Last turn. Beauty isn't the villain. It's a visiting light. If you're lucky, it passes through your life and warms it. Perhaps, just don't build your house on it. If you want to take part, the action is simple. Check the pinned map, visit Adelaide if you're nearby, and pick up 5. 5 pieces of something small that shouldn't be there. It's ordinary work, and that's the point. Maybe the ghost of the Somerton man will thank you. In episode 3, we were trying to explore the bargain of beauty. A useful guest for a while, but a shaky foundation as the mirror changes. After this, in Mount Gambier, episode 4 shifts the lens to social status, other people's scoreboard, and asks what it costs when our self-worth leans too hard on signals like clothes, cars, and prestige.
Today, we're going to plog the Umpherston sinkhole. I think that's how you pronounce it.
I'm Trinity, and this is Plog Vlog. Real places, a little litter picked up, and one true idea we test against the day. We're in Mount Gambier in South Australia, about 1,600 kilometres from home, and the streets here are startlingly tidy. wind ticks through dry grass above the sinkholes. The blue lake sits like a giant eye. Today's lens is simple to name and hard to live with: social status and the fragility of tying our self-esteem to it. Here's an open question for you and me. When do we reach for status to define ourselves? And what does it cost us when we do? I should state the construct in plain English. Status is other people's scoreboard that they read when they think about us. Self-esteem is the story we believe about our own worth when we think about ourselves. These talk to each other, but they're not the same. What it isn't is a destiny. You're not doomed to chase approval. Could the solution be to design healthier channels for esteem and to base it on actions you can repeat, not on things that cost a fortune and can be taken away? Perhaps some context first. My foster father is here plogging, happy in clothes he's owned for years, the exact ones you've seen in previous videos. He buys rarely and only for function. My foster mother rolls her eyes, fondly, and says she's accepted being married to a man who'll always look like he's never had a paid job in his life. It's a running joke at home, and he laughs the loudest. Now let's map the idea. When esteem leans on status, mood rides a seesaw. When esteem leans on actions, mood finds footing. I've watched friends, older, earning more than me, tip into debt for fashion drops, a prestige car, a home renovation that's a good backdrop for TikTok. The price isn't just money, it's time and attention that could have underwritten personal growth, or community, or care. And yet, I won't pretend status never matters. In dating, first impressions count. In job hunting, signals help. In some research, they're linked with opportunities, but they don't decide your fate. The trick is proportion, using status as a tool at the right times, without letting it become the measure of a life. My mentor, old David, talks about his first date shirt, the one that he bought in his late 20s to go on first dates in nightclubs. He says it was his one status item, and it did its job perfectly. Back with me now, editing the footage of my foster father picking up litter in Mount Gambier. This city tells a different story, one where care shows. Curbs are clean, bins aren't overflowing, verges are swept. Last week in Adelaide, the footpaths told the same tale. And my foster father, well, where we live, he has tried to share this ethic. He's spoken with community groups, with church folk, with neighbours on their morning walks. People praise him. They call it inspiring. But the suburb has kept drifting towards being covered in litter. At first, that disheartened him. No one likes pushing on a door that stays shut. He refused to become frustrated, so he shifted lanes. He's decided to focus on picking up litter in wild places and in towns that already look after themselves, because care is contagious. If you need proof, look down. Mount Gambier's streets are almost spotless. Here's a diary thread from my mum Liz to hold our lens steady. Liz wrote this while travelling the USA with her childhood friend David in mid-1993. We must look law-abiding. A policeman with a sniffer dog walked the bus, asked for a particular woman, talked about guns, and, somehow, skipped our bags. She said that tiny exemption felt like safety and a status pass, and it carried a sting, the temptation to believe you deserve to be waved through. Later on that same Greyhound bus ride in Pennsylvania, Mum wrote, somewhere after passing St. Mary's, for a minute we had our own private bus. One man got off, seats opened, and there was the sweetness of having a private bus, until she noticed another passenger up front and the bubble popped. In her words, you can hear the seesaw, a mood lifted by a status lift, then dropped by a correction. Fragile, costly, even with something as seemingly silly as owning a bus ride. I wonder what silly, objectively meaningless things you see around you that coalesce into social status. What are their benefits and what are their costs? I think about that as my foster father searches for litter in Mount Gambier. I also think about the cost side of status we don't often itemise. Financial, yes, but also mental bandwidth. If we peg esteem to signals, we're always auditing. Is my car still signalling to the right tribe? Are my clothes still scoring attention? Do my holiday photos look aspirational enough? How exhausting. And here's a thornier bit. Perhaps my foster father's low-status presentation, a bike instead of a car, the same clothes, his self-deprecating humour, makes it easier for some to dismiss the message. Perhaps the act itself, picking up litter, gets coded as beneath us, a kind of public civility rather than shared stewardship. If esteem is tethered to status, you can see how quickly the mind might say, "That's someone else's job. I won't be seen doing that." Past episodes have been pressing on the same nerve from different angles. In Adelaide, we named the construct Appearance-contingent self-esteem, the fragility of letting the mirror set your worth. In Yarraman, we mapped the concept called trait channel fit, how life works better when your lifestyle suits your temperament. And on Mount Tamborine, we used one small physical task to cut through task paralysis. Today's Mount Gambier thread adds a related caution. When self-esteem leans on social status, mood rides a seesaw. When it leans on repeatable care, it steadies. Let's make a local note to ground that thought. Mount Gambier sits on the cratered country of dormant volcanoes, its lakes fed by limestone aquifers that turn the blue lake a summer blue. The town's pride shows in small practicalities. Tidy medians, cared for verges, civic gardens that aren't left to plastic. None of that arrives by accident. It arrives by countless low-status actions. Council workers and volunteers, and residents doing the small things that no one claps for. The status points accrue elsewhere. The esteem, the quiet satisfaction that comes from taking action. I also wonder about the wider crew my foster father knows. People doing genuinely restorative work. They care little for their own social presentation. They're not the ones optimizing their model-perfect poses in front of famous landmarks. They're planting forests one tree at a time, running through the streets, picking up litter in a banana suit, sowing rainforest seeds into planters under a corrugated iron roof. Is there a barrier here? If the wider community reads these people as low status and looks away, then the best exemplars go unnoticed. That's a public cost. But privately, this matters because they might be saving themselves. Because when esteem is action-based, it doesn't vanish with the season. It's inexpensive, repeatable, durable. It's also, and this is important, shareable. Perhaps helping one person base their self-esteem on picking up litter is more important than 1 million people watching 20 seconds of your YouTube short. If that sounds like a simple but naive moral, I'll complicate it. I'm not immune to the tug of status. In my 20s, I'm learning the hard way that buying the right shoes rarely fixes the wrong day. It just delays the conversation I needed to have with myself. I still like good design. I still want to present well when it helps. During an interview, at a first meeting, if I ever get back into dating. But I'm learning to ask, will this purchase actually deepen my life? Or is it just renting esteem from strangers? Most days, I want the worn soul kind of worth that Liz noticed on that greyhound, the evidence of miles. So, it's time for a reflection to carry us forward. Status can lubricate moments, dating, hiring, opening the first doors. Perhaps use it lightly, and then let it go. Build esteem on actions you can repeat when no one is watching. Noticing opportunities for tidying, caring, sustaining. If you try that here in Mount Gambier, you'll feel oddly at home, because people already are. And if where you live feels resistant, do what my foster father did. Find the places where care already has traction and add your shoulder there. Momentum is its own reward. We'll end where we always do, with an invitation. There's a pinned map in the comments. If you're local, walk one of these or just your own street and pick up 5 small things. If you're not local, design your own lane. Something low status that builds real value. As for us, we're going to visit some of those quiet restorers we know. I've asked my foster father to seek them out and plog alongside them. And he said yes without hesitation, eager as ever to spend another day doing the kind of work that never trends and always counts. There's that pinned map below. If you pass through Mount Gambier, enjoy the crater lakes, pause by the sinkholes, and please pick up 5. It may not push you up the social ladder, but you'll always know what you did, quietly. In episode 4, we were trying to separate esteem from status, noticing how often the people doing the most restorative work look low status from the outside. Next, at Portland's gannet colony, episode 5 presses on winning-based self-esteem, those scoreboards that need someone else to lose, and looks for a kind of winning that doesn't require a loser.
That's my YouTube channel.
My foster father still forgets sometimes that this channel is ours, not just his. I'm Trinity, and this is Plog Vlog. One place, a little litter picked up with care, and a story about what makes a life feel useful. We're in Portland, Victoria, about 1,800 kilometres from home, where the wind smells of kelp and salt, and gannets stitch the air like white needles. A local volunteer told us this headland shelters Australia's only mainland gannet colony. Rope fibres and loops of monofilament are the quiet hazards here. So my foster father is walking the margins, eyes low, scanning for small bright threats. Today's idea is self-esteem, and a specific version of it, feeling good because we've bested someone else. Self-esteem through winning against others. In plain terms, it's the kind that needs a scoreboard. What it isn't, a destiny. None of this decides your fate. And we could ask, so what? Well, if self-regard leans on beating people, perhaps we could sometimes consider switching the game. Design lanes where nobody has to lose for us to stand tall. My foster father never bothers to compete with anybody at anything. He says that he's, at best, mediocre at most things, with no glory days stories to bore people with. Basing self-esteem on winning doesn't even show up on his radar. He's simply not wired for it. But what if winning is on your self-esteem radar? My mentor in psychology, old David, suggested a listening exercise, a certain rock song about glory days. You know the theme, looking back, trying to recapture a feeling, promising you won't get stuck in nostalgia, and then admitting you probably will. Time slipping and leaving you with not much apart from stories about the days you won. No need for a music reaction video here, just the mirror the song holds up. If your worth depends on being ahead, the clock will indefatigably slow your race. Now, back to the present. The wind blows across the sea as the sun rises. A few bits of litter are here and there, deftly dropped into my foster father's handy-dandy clean-up bag. I've been reading my deceased mother, Liz's 1993 diary, and there's a pattern that fits today's construct. Liz wrote something in Eureka, New York, that resonates. We ended up walking miles before we found a motel cheap enough, and this was even $32. And that was after a bit of bargaining. A tiny win. Numbers on a notepad. You can hear how a day brightens by feeling ahead. Cheaper bed, better story. A ribbon pinned in the tone of her writing for being clever. Later, she and David sit on a jetty in Portsmouth watching kids catch crabs with string and bait. Liz wrote, "At the moment, we are sitting on a jetty watching some kids catching crabs. Each shout is a victory. Each child measures themselves against the others for a minute, and that's normal. Practice rounds for a complicated life. But the same day, on the drive back into town, they pass a car overturned. Ambulances, fire trucks, an officer leaning through the window. The scoreboard goes quiet when life flips upside down. Every ladder of status shrinks to whether people are okay. I keep thinking about that as I edit footage of my foster father plogging. A surfer about his age took time to talk, both of them standing not far from a great seal, lying like a dropped boulder at the tide line. Nobody is trying to win, not even the vastly more powerful seal. They're just giving the animal a wide berth and swapping a few friendly sentences about swell and wind. It's the opposite of the beat someone model. You can feel your shoulders drop. The absence of competitive tension. The research is careful on this, so I'll be careful too. There are studies linking self-esteem that's contingent on outperforming others to brittle mood, sharper swings, more rumination, especially when the scoreboard turns against you. Again, nothing here is destiny. We're not fixed in stone. But a life built on beating people is like living on the windward side of a dune. Beautiful some days, sand-blasted on others. If you must keep score, perhaps choose what you measure. Winning against yesterday's you is gentler than winning against the person next to you. Better still, choose games where many can win. Care, craft, stewardship. Old David says Bruce's song works because it whispers a warning, with a grin. The promise is that we won't grow old thinking about it. The confession is that we probably will. I don't want my worth to depend on a future audience that is tired of looking at my old trophies. I want it to depend on what I can still do for places and people today. Back with my foster father now. The gannets keep their own tallies, dives per hour, fish per chick, but that's ecology, not ego. My foster father, who never competes, appears as a walking camera stand in these videos. A bumbling, kind old man with a little camera on his plogging tongs, picking a strand of rope from dune grass, missing one, noticing, going back. No medals for it. He shrugs when I ask him about winning. Wasn't my thing, he says. Never had the skill set. He's content to be useful. That's a lane you can design on purpose. If you're new here, we've tested ideas like this from a few angles already. In Yarraman, we tried trait channel fit, giving a higher appetite for novelty, a healthy lane, so it fuels life rather than leaking sideways towards addiction. In Adelaide, we pulled apart appearance-contingent self-esteem, the brittleness of staking worth on looks or attention. And in Mount Gambier, we asked what it costs to peg our value to social status, other people's scoreboard. Today we braid those threads and ask how to build self-respect that doesn't require anyone else to lose. It's time for a local note. Portland's gannet colony that you saw earlier was nearly gone not so long ago. Steady protections and a culture of watching out. Line cutters on boats, bins near access points, volunteers who scan the beach, and a long fox-proof fence brought it back. It wasn't one heroic win. It was hundreds of small ones that didn't require a loser. That's a scoreboard I can live with. Here's a question for you. When you feel that old itch to be better than someone else, could you swap the game? Turn from beating others to tending something that will still matter in 10 years. I'll close Liz's diary for today and ours, but I'll keep these lessons in a pocket like a coil of rope. Maybe it's healthier to pursue the kind of esteem that doesn't evaporate when the crowd goes home. If you need proof, watch a gannet return to its nest with a beak full of fish. No camera, no podium, no trophy. Just the right work, done on time. Old gannets don't bore each other with stories of glory days. We make these films to help places and lives stay livable. If you're nearby, the pinned map in the comments will show you where we filmed. If you visit, please treat the colony with care, keep dogs leashed, and take your time on the paths. And wherever you are, if you have a spare minute on your walk today, please pick up 5. For the birds, for the next walker, and for a self-respect that doesn't need a loser. Thanks, Bruce. In episode 5, we were trying to contrast the brittleness of being ahead with the quiet satisfaction of unseen wins, like removing fishing line from a nesting headland. After that, along Australia's famous 12 Apostles, episode 6 turns to a different pillar. Self-esteem built on helping, using mentoring and teaching as examples of worth rooted in contribution rather than comparison.
So what do we got here? Of course, it's a coffee mug. It's been sitting here for about 1,000 years.
I'm Trinity, and this is Plog Vlog. We go to a beautiful place, pick up a little litter, and tell a meaningful story about purpose and care. This chapter's overarching construct is pillars of self-esteem. And our focus this episode is the kind of self-esteem you build by helping other people live their own best lives. It's simply providing serving suggestions for how life might be lived, not how it must be lived. Have you found some ways of being that you think others might benefit from knowing? We're on the Great Ocean Road in Victoria, in the area around what they call the 12 Apostles, limestone giants standing out in the Southern Ocean, about 270 kilometres west of Melbourne, and almost exactly 2,000 kilometres by road from our home in Brisbane. Wind lifts salt off the water, gulls arc, waves fold themselves into white. And as I edit my foster father's footage, I'm adding words from my mother's 1993 diary to this script. It's a story I'm determined to tell, as a tribute to my mother, and also to pass on the lessons the pages hold. But before I expand on that, here's that question again. When did helping someone else, quietly, without credit, change how you felt about yourself? Here's something I'd like to share. I've just graduated as a teacher. The school where I did my final practical placement has offered me a Year 4 class for next year. I'm excited and nervous. Old David and I have been talking about self-esteem throughout the production of this Plog Vlog chapter and how easily it gets tangled with identity. Teaching is a beautiful calling, but he warned me about over-identification. If all my worth sits on one pillar, one timetable, one classroom, it can crack the moment the ground shifts. He says that too many variables are out of my control, so a pillar of self-esteem based on being a great teacher is often dug out at the base by many unseen hands. So I'm widening the frame, keeping the classroom, yes, but also exploring how Plog Vlog could help people find meaning in their own lives. Maybe the channel can be more than a nudge to pick up 5 pieces of litter. Maybe it can also be a place to practice ideas that make life feel useful. Old David is my mentor, and my mother was his. He often jokes about how she turned him from a dumbass to not quite a dumbass during their first adventure together in 1993. She translated a Norwegian book to him and explained concepts like fate, being a blank tablet, and knowing what makes us strong. Liz wrote in Boston, "Throughout the park, leaves let go like soft confetti on prams and picnic rugs. Families make small circles of attention. Later, Harvard turns the streets into a carnival. A busker plays panpipes and a small guitar with a devotion that hushes even children." Liz, she's my mum, and a much younger David were travelling on the smell of an oily rag, sleeping on buses with a 30-day Greyhound pass, saving money to keep a larger promise going. It wasn't glamorous. Albany at midnight, fluorescent light over plastic chairs, disinfectant losing to old vomit, the slow ache of boots not taken off for days. She entertained and saved him with that little philosophy book. He'd been called Dumb Dave by kids at school and had learned to develop his strength and reflexes to convince them to stop. Huge deadlifts and technically perfect uppercuts might have quieted the bullies, but they did nothing to stop that feeling of not being the sharpest tool in the shed. Liz's diary did a clean pivot from the USA to the UK, which usually meant that her pen was too heavy after a late-night bender. Liz eventually wrote that, after 6 hours of sky stitched into one long blink, London opens under a pale morning. We sort out the Africa leg of the trip at a tour group office, then to Trafalgar Square and the South African Embassy to ask, politely, urgently, for visas to be ready tomorrow. When they stepped outside, there's a commotion. They wait, curious, and watch Prince Charles go into a church. And Liz worked hard at enlightening David as they waited to see him come out again. By his mid-20s, David could read, but neither Norwegian nor competently, so Mum took it on herself to help his mind grow. He had the nights to think about the ideas she'd shared with him while he lay in bed and she was out in nightclubs. The word bed is an exaggeration. It was on the floor of a $15 tent coaxed into shape by boots and bags pressed up against the walls. Let's come back to me editing my foster father's rough and ready footage, captured by battered action cameras that have scratches from a multitude of places etched into their casings. The wind pushes at cliff edges. Worn pillars stand like time made visible. He searches for litter along the path, bottle cap, chocolate wrap, the plastic collar from a juice bottle. And I think about what psychologists call sociometer theory. Self-esteem as a kind of social barometer. It rises when we feel we matter to others. It dips when we feel excluded. Healthy pillars grow when our helping is reliable and freely chosen, not when it's a performance or a way to avoid our own work. There's overlap here with virtue ethics too. Character forms by practice. If I practice being useful in small, steady ways, I become the sort of person who can carry responsibility without crumbling when the bell rings or the timetable changes. Let's consider that again. Healthy pillars grow when our helping is reliable and freely chosen. Can I count paid teaching as freely chosen? What are your thoughts? Editing and producing Plog Vlog is freely chosen. I'm not getting paid, but I feel like I'm sharing ideas that matter. Ideas that might change someone's life. Even if not, those ideas are changing my life. Old David said something that stuck. Make several lanes where contribution can flow. Don't force everything through one narrow channel. For me, the classroom is one lane. Plog Vlog could be another. Less about me teaching, more about me sharing ideas that have taken me from dark places inside myself to bright oases, pointing at those places that need care, offering language for meaning, and showing how tiny acts cascade. In earlier episodes, we kept circling this: care beyond biological connections, responsibility to place, and pressing on the idea that place can tutor patience. Today adds the verb help. Help a person, help a plan, help a place. Let your worth rest partly on the weight you can lift for someone else. Then make sure you're not the only one lifting. Let's make a short note about this place to hold the idea. The 12 apostles are not 12, and never were. They're a handful of limestone stacks carved from cliffs by wind and sea on what's called the shipwreck coast. Each pillar looks solitary, but the geology is cooperative. Softer layers yield, harder layers stand. The whole coastline adjusting itself, grain by grain. The day at the coast runs out of gold and into pearl. The skies gather clouds and paint rainbows over the dangerous seas off the shipwreck coast near Port Campbell. The rain starts, soft at first, then committed. As I watch footage of my foster father getting wet while he looks for litter around an isolated war memorial, I think about where this channel is heading. I've made this chapter about finding pillars of self-esteem, and hope that sharing what I've learned from old David has added value to some people's lives. Liz mentored David. Decades later, he's mentoring me. I want to share what I'm learning, to plant some seeds of ideas out in the world that might grow into beautiful trees. Perhaps you're one of those trees, struggling a little in infertile, dry ground, just needing a sprinkling of ideas to nourish your roots and help you flourish. Before we go, if you're new here, the way to help out is simple. There's a pinned map in the comments. If you can, visit a place near you that you care about. Take gloves, take a bag, and pick up 5 pieces of litter. Then, on your way home, ask the open question again. Whose best day could you hold a little steadier this week? And who could you share your growth with? And what kind of person will that make you? In episode 6, we were trying to show how guiding and lifting others can grow a pillar of self-esteem that outlives job titles and changing timetables. Following that, in the beautiful Apollo Bay, episode 7 runs up against intelligence-contingent self-esteem, as my foster father admits he's not a particularly bright spark, but leans instead on usefulness, care, and follow-through. I'm Trinity. This is Plog Vlog. We go somewhere real, pick up litter, and tell a story about purpose and care. My foster father is in Apollo Bay, Victoria. Southern ocean swell, gulls needling the wind, damp eucalyptus lifting from the Otways. He's honest about something many people dodge. He's not intelligent. He jokes that he's a bit like Forrest Gump, bumbling through, trying to do the right things for the right reasons. School never fitted, words slipped, numbers tangled, books were a mystery. He left early and worked wherever he was accepted. A piggery, an abattoir, farm labour, standing on nightclub doors. He felt built for jobs that didn't ask much of the brain, yet he found sturdier places to rest his self-esteem, habits that didn't require being clever. Long before "stupid is as stupid does" became a quote everyone knew, he chose to live by doing things that aren't stupid. My foster father doesn't think that spending his life picking up litter in places like Apollo Bay is stupid. What do you think? He asked me, what better way could I be spending my life? Today's lens is intelligence-contingent self-esteem, staking our worth on being smart. This is not anti-intellectual. Brains matter. Problem-solving helps. But intelligence doesn't decide your value. Why does this matter? Because basing self-respect on what you practice daily, care, effort, reliability, and how you treat people can't be toppled by a hard book, a failed test, or walking into a room filled with quicker minds. Here's a question to sit with as the morning wind crosses the bay. When you strip away marks, rankings, and verbal fireworks, what do you still respect about yourself? As usual in these Plog Vlog episodes, let's flash back to my mum's life. Liz and her friend, now my mentor David, reached the United Kingdom in 1993. Once they'd picked up a battered hire car and began meandering north from London, chasing obscure English heritage ruins, her diary entries thinned. For this stretch, I've lent more on older David's recollections than Mum's writings. He said having wheels and pubs everywhere changed the rhythm of their days. They'd park on the outskirts of small towns. Sometimes they ate together at a pub, but often Mum asked him to leave her there. He'd walk back to the car, eat groceries bought on the drive, then fold into the driver's seat to sleep. Those nights had several endings. A tap on the glass soon after closing time, or nearer to dawn. Or he'd go for a first light wander and return to find her sleeping on the ground beside the car. He tried early on to find her in the mornings, but it never worked, so he had to accept there wasn't anything he could do to keep her safe. Focusing back on Apollo Bay, and this chapter about self-esteem, the pillars we base it on, and what collapses with time and adversity. In Mount Gambier, we named the cost of tying our value to social status. In Portland, we examined esteem based on winning. Along the 12 Apostles, we stood under stone that dwarfs tiny human scoreboards. Here, I'm thinking about intelligence. Intelligence-contingent esteem feels safe if you've always topped the class. You get quick praise for being bright, gifted, perhaps a natural. The trap is brittleness. One subject won't click, one room where your words arrive second, one colleague who sees angles you miss and your worth wobbles. Suddenly, you feel like an imposter. You start avoiding challenges that might expose you, or you armor up with jargon and defensiveness. My foster father's way, IQ irrelevant but curious and steady, points to another foundation. He bases esteem on what doesn't require a high score. Learning to live a useful life, noticing what's in front of him, showing up for unglamorous work, sharing what he learns in case it helps someone feel more valuable. He knows what he can't do and practices what he can. When he teaches himself a new skill, or reads a page twice and gets it the third time, or leaves a shoreline cleaner than he found it, he counts it as real progress. No special cleverness, just attention and follow through. If you want a practical lane, choose esteem targets that are under your control and repeatable. Keeping promises, listening before speaking, asking good questions, finishing small tasks, tidying the oases in this world. Intelligence can assist all of these, but none depend on being the smart one. They depend on care. Let's state a note for those who love brains and books. Cognitive ability is a tool, and it's unevenly distributed. Some process language faster, some see number patterns, some retain spectacularly by rote. Practice and early conditions contribute. Socioeconomic status, perhaps even more. None of that decides who you must be. What shapes the feel of your days is the design of your lanes. What you reward yourself for, what you practice, and how you treat the people within arm's reach. You choose. Apollo Bay sits where the Otway forests lean over the sea. Timber mills, fishing, and seasonal tourism shaped this place. But the deeper pattern is meeting points, rainforest and reef, labour and weather, careful seamanship and an indifferent ocean. People here respect skill, yes, but also reliability. Show up, mend the net, check the lines, mind the swell. That's a kind of intelligence too, the practical kind. I grew up being told I was good with words. It helped. Until I walked into rooms at university where everyone was. What steadied me wasn't a bigger claim. It was smaller habits. Prepare one thoughtful question. Listen all the way to the end. Send the follow-up you promised. When I do those, I like who I am, regardless of what anyone thinks I am. My words and my foster father's clumsily recorded footage come together to share ideas that might help others find meaning. Wind pushes a line of foam to the high tide mark. My foster father bends, lifts a sun-whitened bottle cap, drops it in the bag. That's our lane. If you're new here, the standing invite is simple. Check the pinned map for nearby spots, visit if you can, and pick up 5. My foster father isn't a smart man, but he knows what love is, sharing solid pillars for self-esteem. In episode 7, we were trying to loosen the knot between intelligence and value, treating IQ as a tool rather than a verdict on a life. In the next episode, at the Eureka Stockade site in Ballarat, episode 8 scales the question up to national identity-based self-esteem. How who we are as a country can both inspire courage and tempt us into feelings of superiority.
Time to go plog the Eureka Stockade.
I'm Trinity, and this is Plog Vlog. We go to an important place, pick up some litter, and tell a story about purpose and care. We're in Ballarat, Victoria, at the site of the Eureka Stockade. Wind ticks through the gums. Rain diffuses the morning light, leaving an appropriate battle grey tinge to even the trees. My foster father shrugs it off, as usual, ready to clean up at the site of Australia's most famous civil unrest. Today's lens is self-esteem built on national identity. We could also call it basing your sense of worth on who we are as a country. That can be a sturdy beam or a brittle crutch. The question worth holding is this: What happens to your self-esteem if it rests too heavily on the nation, and then your country does something that's against your morals? Eureka is a load-bearing story. In 1854, miners on the Ballarat goldfields swore an oath under a new flag, the Southern Cross, resisting licence fees and the harassment that came with them. The stockade they built here fell quickly to British troops. People died on both sides. But the event helped push reform, representation, fairer laws, the slow turn toward a more democratic way of living. For many, Eureka became mateship and fairness in embryo. The idea that we don't just obey, we bargain for dignity. The word we became the nation of Australia 47 years later, when the British relinquished Australia to become an independent nation. Well, kinda. Importantly, there were people here way before that who never relinquished their land. That's a way bigger story that I don't feel qualified to tell. Let's examine our focus construct more closely. National identity does two different jobs, depending on how we hold it. The healthy version points us to shared obligations, stories that ask for care beyond ourselves. The brittle version flatters us into feelings of superiority, that we are better than them, and it can shatter the first time our perception widens. Back in Mount Gambier, we looked at how self-esteem that is tied to social status is expensive and fragile. At Portland, we challenged self-esteem based on winning against others, and found that it can fade into boring stories of glory days. The pillars that last have been quieter. Practice, service, community. If a national story nudges us toward those verbs, it helps. If it just facilitates our in-group, out-group biases, it can fall into the muddy, violent mire that is often the outcome of such prejudiced biases. To take a break from that heavy topic, let's do the usual check-in on my mother Liz and her friend David, this time driving north in 1993 Britain. They were living very close, too close, in a battered rental car. David drove because Mum was partying a little too hard. Once she got over her morning queasiness, she'd munch and crunch her breakfast. Loudly. Louder than Hadaway on the radio, asking, "What is love?" And Ace of Base declaring that all that she wants is another baby. David later learned a name for the disgust that he felt. Misophonia, when certain sounds can trigger outsized revulsion, commonly the sounds of people eating. He found himself stepping out of the car before meals, thinking up excuses to take photos, lace his boots, pretend to pee. Anything to keep the attraction he felt for Mum from curdling into repulsion. When I asked him about it, a much older David told me that nothing worked. By the time they'd reached Scotland, his romantic feelings for Liz had been cured. Why did that happen? Because feelings often mislabel their source. Nausea from chewing sounds became labelled as nausea felt about the person. National identity does that too. A flag, a song, a collective feeling of we, and the body fills in the rest. The Southern Cross stitched itself into 100 kinds of felt esteem. For some, it became a motivator for worker solidarity and democratic stubbornness. For others, it slid into a reason to exclude outgroups. One symbol, many stories, not all of them compatible. So how do we build the national identity pillar well? Let's start with a sober reading of Eureka. Courage and error, hotheads and reform, lives cut short, and a community saying, we are not just revenue. If we anchor esteem to that mix, fallibility plus repair, it's less likely to collapse when confronted by new facts or old wounds. Swap we are good for we are responsible. Swap we are better for we are learning. Esteem that lives in verbs, serve, repair, include, survives more weather than esteem that lives in unquestioned slogans. I haven't yet found any indication in Liz's diaries of her having feelings for David, or anything about him chewing. I asked the older David about this. he just said. She didn't see me that way. Yet? Not for a few years. Rabies unravelled that complication. He refused to elaborate further. Back with my foster father at the stockade site, in the growing rain. The miner's oath to stand truly by each other has echoed in parliaments and pubs. If we let that echo push us towards community work, towards the practical care of places and people, we get a national identity that's more like a tool than a trophy. It invites us to belong by doing, through service, not by boasting. My foster father is picking up litter unseen. Most of what he lifts is small, almost insignificant. He doesn't expect the country to love him for it. That's not the point. The point is to take responsibility for what's ours to tend. Many Australians feel pride about this place. Could pride be the catalyst for small acts, as well as revolutionary fervour? So we'll revisit that open question again, because saying it aloud matters. What happens to your self-esteem if your nation does something you cannot accept? You rebuild the pillar. You move your weight from unquestioned pride to considered responsibility, from perceived superiority to humble service. You make your we strong enough to hold both the courage and the error, and then you act. If you're new here, there are pinned maps in the comments of our videos. Tamborine to Yarraman to Mount Gambier to Portland and beyond. If you can visit, check the comments. Head out safely, and please pick up 5 for the next person. That's a simple way to stand truly by each other. In episode 8, we were trying to hold the double edge of national identity, swapping "we are better" for "we are responsible" when we talk about flags and stories. Up next, in Wulkuraka near Ipswich, episode 9 returns to the other end of the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail and focuses directly on helping-based self-esteem. Small, regular acts of physical care for shared spaces as a repeatable pillar. I'm Trinity, producer and narrator of Plog Vlog, and that's a train arriving at Wulkuraka railway station in Ipswich, Australia. My foster father is heading to the head of the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail with good intentions, a stubborn cold, and bruises from filming previous episodes. We're here because, back in episode 2 of this chapter, he cleaned the other end of the rail trail. Today, near Ipswich, we bookend the chapter's journey, 161 kilometres apart, by tidying the opposite gateway. This whole chapter has examined pillars of self-esteem, 1 per episode. This time, we're looking at self-esteem based on helping, the steadying kind of worth we take from doing something useful for others or for the places we share. What I'll try to show is simple: how beautiful places can be held with a little care. Him on camera, picking up, me at the desk, threading the ideas underneath why this matters. He came here twice. The first visit, wrong weather, wrong shoes, wrong body. He wasn't recovered from that cold and his heels were bruised from weeks of running and climbing in gumboots, so he walked a kilometre or so and chose to retreat, to fight another day. The second visit was clearer. Better weather, better footing, longer sections walked, more litter collected. The head of the trail came up cleaner, metre by metre. Between those 2 walks, I spoke with my mentor, my mother's lifelong friend, David. Once, he stacked his own worth on trying to save the world. He resisted apartheid in South Africa in the early 90s. In 2018, he demonstrated with the Me Too movement in San Francisco. In 2020, he marched, masked, in Brisbane's giant Black Lives Matter crowd, and many protests between. The frustration, he said, was a tide that never turned. Long breaks in the bush led to a realization. He couldn't save the world or humanity. What he could do was show alternatives that might be useful if people wanted to save themselves. That line lives through me and Plog Vlog now. If living mostly to buy the next thing isn't filling the space you hoped it would, there's another rhythm on offer. Visit a place that's beautiful and leave it a little less messy than you found it. It won't change the climate graph today. It won't end the adverts. It won't make the noise stop. But it might add weight to a pillar that doesn't wobble every time the algorithm twitches. Across this chapter, I've realised something about my own pillars. Part of my self-esteem now comes from making and sharing ideas that could help, even a little, those psychological, philosophical, sociological threads stitched to real earth and real bins. My foster father's hands do the picking. As a team, we do the assembling. Together we try to hold open a door. Nothing grand, just a way through for anyone who wants steadier ground. Time for a short intermission, a personal story, and a note on what's changing here. As Plog Vlog grows, the narration, the video, and the team are shifting shape. The most exciting change is that Crystal has officially joined us. She keeps my scripts from sliding back into the overly flowery prose that muddied chapters 1 and 2, and brings deep knowledge across psychology, philosophy, and sociology that strengthens the thinking under each episode.
And I think we're ready to go. That's a learning experience.
You'll also notice a clearer architecture from now on. 3 parts every time. First, the construct and the place, what the idea is and where we are. Second, an intermission story, one scene that lets the idea breathe. Third, the apply section, research and tiny actions that might make a difference in ordinary days. The aim is clarity, simple, well-founded ideas that improve the felt texture of life. There's also a visual shift. Chapter 4 will be our most demanding plogging expedition so far. I've decided I won't go.
I filmed myself picking up rubbish to encourage other people. That's why I've got all the bristling cameras.
My foster father will be fully in charge of filming across diverse locations and conversations. To protect those interactions and reduce the friction of fiddly gear, we're transitioning from the DJI universe to Insta360. Fewer fiddles, fewer missed moments, more listening. Now the story, my mum's story. Recently, I asked David if he'd ever been in love with my mother Liz. He said he'd been uncomfortably attracted to her since they'd met again as adults. Always loved her as a friend. But he knew he could never be with her because of how alcohol moved through her life. And because he'd watched alcohol kill his own father, seen the jaundice yellow the day he died. Prophetically, perhaps predictably, Liz died in California in 2020 from liver failure. I asked how that landed for him. He paused, then said, "Have you heard of the concept of pre-grieving?" In the quiet after that, I understood he'd been doing a kind of anticipatory goodbye for years. Not as a judgment, but as a way of standing ready for a loss that kept announcing itself. That's all the scene needs to carry. No lesson, just a contour. In a chapter about steadier pillars, it's a reminder that some of us build our supports around what we can hold and loosen our grip on what we can't. Back to the trail in a moment. And then we'll make this useful. Back now at Wulkuraka to examine the theory and research. If you're curious about self-esteem based on helping, 3 potential benefits keep showing up in the literature and in lived experience. First, people often report a steadier sense of worth when they do small pro-social acts regularly. Less spiky, less dependent on likes or wins, more consistent with an internal standard. Second, helping is linked with lower rumination and a gentler mood profile afterwards, especially when the action is physical and outdoors. Third, there's a quiet social dividend. Light touch stewardship in shared places is associated with feeling more connected to those places and the people who use them, even when no one speaks. What might underlie those shifts? Two mechanisms seem plausible. One is behavioural activation. Doing a concrete, useful task, like removing 5 visible bits of litter, can interrupt unhelpful loops and create a small sense of completion that carries into the next hour. Another is identity alignment. Repeated acts of care for common spaces can, over time, support a self-story that says, "I'm someone who helps," which is associated with more stable self-evaluation than appearance, status, or winning alone. Here are some tiny actions you can try, tuned to this trailhead context. 1. Set a helping rep. 5 minutes at the start or end of a walk, ride or commute to remove the most obvious items from a small patch. 30 minutes if you can. 5 if not. 2. Pair it with a note to future you, on paper or in your phone, recording the patch, the count, and 1 sentence about how the place looked afterwards. That's not for social media. It's for building your own line of evidence that your effort registers in the world you move through. If you bring a friend next time, even better, but it's not required. If you're already trying this, you don't need bigger claims from me. You'll know the after feel. If you're new, start where you are. Watch how the pillar behaves across a week. Does it wobble less on days with a small act? If it does, you've learned something about how your esteem rests, and you've nudged a place a notch cleaner. If this nudged your day in a steadier direction, I'm glad. The Commons is open. The map is pinned. And if you visit Wulkuraka, please help keep it litter-free and pick up 5. In episode 9, we were trying to show how tiny pro-social acts, like tidying the second gateway to the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail, can steady mood and identity more reliably than likes or outrage. Finally, above Brisbane's lookouts in episode 10, we ask whether being a person who shares things like time, knowledge, attention and care can be a stable last pillar. As Plog Vlog prepares to head overseas in search of people who have found meaning through actions rather than just words.
Yeah, bush turkey.
Basing self-esteem on being a person who shares. That's our last pillar in this chapter on self-esteem as we explore the most famous lookouts above our home city of Brisbane in Australia. The air is humid after last night's storms. From Mount Cootha to Mount Nebo, Kangaroo Point Cliffs to Mount Gravatt Lookout. The city is spread out beneath my foster father in this episode, sometimes hidden by fog, and later like a lit-up diagram of the lives we're about to leave. This is the final episode of Chapter 3 and the last time we stay put in Brisbane for a while. From here, Plog Vlog will leave Australia and look for people who have found clear meaning in their lives, to understand how that meaning seems to protect them from the mental maladies that are becoming more common in our societies. In this last stop, we're looking at whether being a person who shares is a stable pillar of self-esteem. By that, I mean letting some part of your self-esteem rest on what you share with others. Time, knowledge, attention, care, even physical things, rather than on what you own, display, or protect. Not sharing because you have to, or because you are afraid of saying no, but sharing as a chosen part of who you are. That's what Plog Vlog is becoming. Not just a vlog that promotes plogging, but a way of sharing modes of living that others might cherry pick.
Morning. Enjoy the view. I promise you it is usually good.
We got lucky. Wow, we got a rare sight, guys.
10 cents.
Across this chapter, we've seen how self-esteem can cling to all sorts of hooks. It can be pegged on getting things done. How one small useful task can puncture the fog when your mind is crowded. It can cling to having the right outlet for your temperament. The way some people only feel steady when their restlessness has a healthy lane.
Okay, I've got to know what they're like to ride. Yeah.
They're pretty good.
Yeah?
They're really smooth, yeah. Was that your back just over
The
there?
DR, yeah.
That's good.
Self-esteem can also cling to the ephemeral, to beauty, to being noticed, to the shine of attention. It can cling to status, to looking important, to other people's scoreboard of titles and symbols. It can cling to winning, needing to be ahead of someone else for the day to feel worthwhile. We've looked at self-esteem that leans on being clever, or quick, or the smart one in the room. We've also looked at self-esteem that leans on flags and national stories, the comfort and the danger of wrapping your worth too tightly in a country's identity. And we've kept returning to that one quieter pillar, self-esteem that rests on helping, mentoring, and environmental philanthropic action, where your value comes from what you add to the commons that we all share. Seen together, these are like different pillars of the same temple, holding up a heavy roof. Some pillars are shaky. They move when your looks change, or your job title disappears, or you lose a game you were meant to win. Other pillars are steadier because they depend less on comparison and more on contribution. Consumer culture tries to tell us that the good life is about acquiring more beauty, more status, more wins, and more stuff. But standing above a city like Brisbane, it's hard not to see that a meaningful life is also about circulation. How abilities, kindness, knowledge and care move between people. Being a person who shares is one way of quietly refusing the story that you are only as good as what you can acquire for yourself. In this episode, as my foster father moves between these lookouts on a battered yellow motorcycle, we're going to hold one question over the city. If you looked at your life from up here, what would you see yourself sharing? And how might shifting even a small part of your self-esteem onto that pillar make you steadier for whatever comes next? Time for a short intermission and more about the story of my mother Liz. It's 1993, and Liz and her friend David are sitting under the Eiffel Tower, with his blood pooling on the ground between his worn leather boots. The iron lattice is above them. Tourists and hawkers move in slow loops, and Liz is trying to keep her eyes on the sky instead of on the deep slice that runs across the palm of his hand. He'd accidentally inflicted it upon himself while clumsily cutting an orange with a razor-sharp pocket knife. They've heard the stories, other travellers warning them away from Paris hospitals, saying they're teeming with hepatitis, mixing hearsay and fear into a kind of background hum that's followed them across borders. They've also been told, back in Australia, to carry their own syringes and a suture kit for emergencies in Africa. Now those bits of advice meet in one small, dreadful decision. They will not go to hospital. They will stitch his hand themselves when they go back to their cheap Parisian room.
It's like a DR. Is it a DR? It is a DR, and he's even got a DR number plate. What is it, a DR 250? I think it's a DR 250. No, it's a 650. Sweet as.
Liz writes that David unwraps the suture kit on a makeshift surface. A bit of cloth, something that turns the cockroach-ridden hotel into a clinic. He cleans the wound as best he can, the blood still welling as he works. The skin of his palm is tough from years of manual labour, almost resistant to the needle. Liz is supposed to help. She has already shown him, in a derelict cellar back near the Isle of Wight, that fear can shut her down completely. Walls furred with spiders, egg sacs hanging like black punctuation marks, her body locking up while he stayed curious and unbothered. In that Paris hotel room, something similar happens in a quieter way. As David poises the needle over his own flesh, Liz feels the world tilt.
Morning.
So, I wonder what he's doing.
I filmed myself picking up rubbish.
Oh, yes.
And my foster daughter puts it on YouTube and promotes other people doing it.
Good idea.
So you're out for a nice walk.
Yes, we are.
I can cut you out if you want,
Oh, no, I
if you're
don't
on
want to
witness
see that.
protection or anything. I just do different spots. I've done Mount Nebo, I did Mount Cootha this morning, and she just blends them all together, and yeah.
Hey, you've been around, eh?
Oh, well, yeah, don't tell anyone though. Have a good one.
I feel sick, she says, turning her head away. It's a small sentence in the diary, but everything turns on it. She cannot bring herself to watch him push the needle in. She can't hold the skin or tie the knots. David keeps going without her. He pushes the needle through the tough skin of his palm, pulls it out and ties each stitch with his uninjured left hand, and his mouth, methodical, absorbed in the task. From the outside, it's one scene. A couple of backpackers in a famous city, doing something wildly ill-advised instead of sitting in a waiting room. From the inside, it's a study in how adversity lands differently in two people who care about each other. For Liz, this is another confirmation that she faints at the sight of blood, that there are hard limits to what she can do. For David, it is proof that his body can be patched and carried on. Another mile marker in a journey that will run through Europe, Turkey, Africa and back home. The diary doesn't spell out a lesson, and I won't either. It just draws a quiet contrast. One person hardened by experience into a kind of homemade resilience. Another left queasy and shaken by the same event. Later, when we talk about what makes some pillars of self-esteem steadier than others, I keep coming back to that blood on the ground under the Eiffel Tower, and the space between Liz turning away and David tying the final knot with his teeth. Back with my foster father now at the Brisbane Lookouts, while I explain the research and theory. We've spent a chapter tracing the different hooks our self-esteem can cling to. Here, at the edge of this city, I want to leave you with one particular way of seeing yourself. As a person who shares, not perfectly, not in every situation, just enough that when you describe who you are to yourself, "I'm someone who shares" is part of the sentence. There are 3 very human reasons this might matter for you. First, people who share their time, skills or attention often describe a stronger sense of connection and belonging. When you teach someone what you know, show up to help, or share a place you love, you create threads between lives. And those threads can feel like they hold you up when other parts of life are unraveling. Second, self-esteem that rests partly on sharing tends to be less fragile than self-esteem resting mostly on appearance, status, or winning. If your worth depends on always looking young, always being ahead, or always being the clever one, then aging, setbacks and mistakes can feel like personal collapses. When some of your worth comes from what you give, knowledge, care, stewardship, then even on the days when you lose or feel invisible, there is still a story in which you matter. Third, sharing is one doorway into meaning. Psychologists sometimes talk about mattering, the sense that you count to other people and to your community. Pro-social behaviour, things like helping neighbours, volunteering, or mentoring, is often associated with higher life satisfaction and lower loneliness, especially when it feels chosen rather than forced. Sharing your experience, time, or effort can be a modest, everyday way of building that sense of mattering. In research on mental health, there is growing interest in how meaning and contribution relate to resilience. It's early and the patterns are complex, but many studies suggest that people who feel their lives serve something beyond personal gain are less likely to be pulled under by certain forms of despair. That doesn't make anyone immune. It doesn't erase trauma, illness, or systemic injustice, but it does seem consistent that investing in something shared, a cause, a craft, a community, can give people a steadier story to stand on when things are hard. So what might this look like from where you are? One tiny action you could take is to find a high point in your own week. It doesn't need to be a lookout. It could be a hill, a balcony, a bus window at the top of a bridge. Give yourself 5 minutes, 30 if you can, to look over the place you live and quietly ask, what could I share here? A skill, a calming presence, a bit of local knowledge, the willingness to pick up rubbish that no one is paying you to pick up. Another tiny action could be to choose one concrete sharing act for the next 7 days. It might be helping a younger colleague, offering a lift, teaching someone how to mend something instead of throwing it away, or joining a local cleanup. If you're up for it, you can use the Commons map we've pinned to find a spot that needs care and go there, not just to consume the view, but to leave it slightly better than you found it. In the next chapter, as we leave Brisbane behind, we'll be searching the world for people who have built their lives around exactly this kind of sharing. People whose self-esteem rests more on what flows through them to others than on what stops with them. We'll ask how that choice has shaped their sense of meaning and how it might have protected them, at least a little, from the mental health struggles that touch so many households now. If this nudged your day in a steadier direction, I'm glad. The Commons is open, the map is pinned, and if you visit these Brisbane lookouts, please help keep them litter-free and pick up 5.